evening, everybody. It's 7 o'clock here. Appreciate you taking the time to join in with us. It's myself and my friend Darren Bailey coming to you from the great southern part of the state. Believe it or not, Darren and I are probably at least a couple hours apart. It gets pretty big down here. So to the extent we say we're both in southern Illinois, Darren's really more southern Illinois than me. But I talked to Darren a couple of days ago, and he was kind enough to give us some of his time to discuss something that I've been wanting to talk about. Darren and I've talked about it briefly, not a whole lot. I mean, he kind of understands in general the conversation I want him to have, but it has to do with Illinois politics, party unity, things of that nature that I think people need to understand at a little deeper level than's out there in the general atmosphere. Darren and I have, I think, a unique perspective in that in 2022, we both ran for a statewide office. And so we got to experience some of the things that we'll talk to you about this evening. Darren, even a little more than I, because prior to 2022, I had no experience in the political world. Darren started off, I believe, around 2018 when he ran for the State House of Representatives for a reason that one of the messages that I want to talk about tonight as it relates to unity, Darren actually lived that. So I think his experience will be, what was the name of the gentleman you ran against in the primary, Darren?
David Rice.
Yes. Okay. And so, it has to do with this idea of unity. And what it comes down to is something that we don't talk about, in my opinion, in Illinois Republican politics enough, is how do we win elections, right? How do we win elections as Republicans? There's far too many people in Illinois that are in that self-defeated mentality that say, oh, we just can't win in Illinois because Chicago and the Democrats in Cook County, they're all crooked, they all cheat. And it's just not true. Mathematically, it's not true. Realistically, it's not true. I know it's not. Darren knows it's not. And so that's kind of what we're going to talk about. I've got one little quick chart here I'm going to throw up for a second that kind of lays this out. And I want Darren to speak about it a little bit too. But what I've got here, again, it's very superficial. But what it does is it grabs the governor's race going back to 1978. And it looks at the Illinois population, looks at Cook County's population, and looks at the Democrat-Republican vote for governor, and then the percentage of the vote as it's compared to the population. A couple of things to glean from this is, one, if you look at the Illinois population and the percentage of the Cook County population of that total from the 70s until now, actually Cook County has a lesser percentage of the overall population of our state than it did back in the 70s. So to suggest that it has grown so much and gotten so big that it consumes the vote totals to the point we don't have any other options, it's statistically not true. I mean, there's 5.1 million people, give or take, in 2022 out of 12.5 in the state. And you go back into the 70s and it was 5.3 million in Cook County with 11.4 in the state. So the actual percentage of Cook County population is less. Another thing I want to point out is if you look at the governor's totals back in the 70s all the way up into the late 90s, we had a governor that was Republican for all of those years, okay? And overwhelmingly, it was a Republican state back up until around 2000, 2002 to when a Democrat won. But what I want you to look at is even when the Democrats started winning in early 2000, is the vote totals for these midterm elections were still in that 1.5 to 1.8 million range of vote totals. And you see that all the way up until 2014 when Governor Rauner was able to still win as a Republican. And then if you look in 2018 and 2022, that's when things started changing drastically when Governor Pritzker came into the picture and the vote totals start ramping up well into the 2 million plus range. And those are new voters. That's not a bunch of Republican voters that started voting like Democrats. These were people that they were adding to their existing base, okay? And that's something I wanted to point out. And the last thing before I let Darren talk about this, if he wants, how many times have you heard people say, oh, we just got to have the right kind of Republican in Illinois? If we just had some, you get up north in the northern part of our state a lot, we just need somebody, Don Tracy's famous words to me, or a more squeamish Republican. We need a more squeamish Republican because it takes a moderate or a left-leaning Republican to win. It's not true. And one of the things I'll point out to you that if you look at where In 2018, Governor Rauner lost to J.B. Pritzker about 1.76 million. Then you had Darren in 2022, who also was unsuccessful against Governor Pritzker, but Darren had 1.74. So there's only 25,000 votes difference between Darren and Rauner. And they're not necessarily similar type of Republicans. They have a little bit different foundation of type of men that they were, and that's okay. But my point to you is that the categorization of type of Republican is not have anything to do with voter turnout. Darren and Bruce had about the same amount of voter turnout. And again, I would say their voter turnout was not much different statistically than the last 30, 40 years of turnouts for Republicans, because that just is the efforts that we've seen undertaken by traditional Republican campaign tactics. So Governor Pritzker really flipped the script on this and made Democrats in a much more competitive, advantageous place, because of what we'll talk about later is vote by mail is really where all those votes are coming from, because 78% of all vote by mail ballots are being turned in as Democrats. So Darren, you want to add anything here?
No, this is good, Tom. I'm just, as you're talking, I'm looking at all the people getting on, and just, gosh, just seeing the names from all over the state. It's amazing. So God bless you for doing what you're doing. And you know, being a farmer, being a business person, you know, having influence as a state senator, you know, there are people out there that will look at me especially. Well, gosh, you served a term as a state rep, and then you went up to the Senate, and then you ran for governor, and are you just running for positions? And I'm here to tell you, and I think that's, Tom, I truly believe in Illinois, Republicans can win if the party would get their act together and quit frustrating the people. I truly believe that if, you know, 60+% of the people would have shown up and turned out in 2018, that we would have won. We could have won. And well, unfortunately,
you're right, Darren. And I use that as an example of your race for people. If you look at the 2020, again, people are enamored with presidential races, right? I think it still comes back from our thousands of years ago. You know, people have been ruled by kings. And again, this new idea of the, you know, American dream, it's relatively new in civilization. So we get enamored with presidential races, and we traditionally have higher turnout in those races than we do midterms. You and I know that. But if we look at 2020, there were 2.4 million people that voted Republican in 2020. So my point is that there are that many Republican like-minded voters in this state. But in 2022, in the midterm, only 1.7 million of them turned out in the midterm when you and I ran. If those Republicans would have voted in 2022 that are there because they voted in 20, you'd have a Republican governor, a Republican attorney general, a Republican comptroller, a Republican secretary of state in Illinois today. So the message for that is that the numbers are there. There's enough Republicans in this state to make it red. It's how do you get them to vote? And that's what we'll talk about a little bit more.
Right. And you're right, because even in Chicago, when you look at the numbers and statistics in Chicago, Chicago's steady. It's almost always 30% turnout. And the Democrats are able, whether it's fraud or not, I don't know. And I'm not going to claim such until we have a high percentage turnout. You know, this fall election, the presidential election, maybe just that. But I talk to people all the time who are just, they throw their hands up. They're like you and I. They're out working, literally, you know, with their hands. They're realists, and they get frustrated, and they want to rebel against the system. They think, well, my way of rebelling is I'm not going to vote because it's rigged. Chicago, it's, you know, my vote doesn't count. And this last primary, what we have a trend taking place in Illinois, and there are several counties: White County, Williamson County, Rock Island County. There are groups out there where people are listening, and they're running for precinct committee person, and they're getting involved, and they're flipping their counties. This is leadership. That's what I call establishment leadership. We'll talk about this a little bit later, because when I talk about rhinos, well, I'm also going back to establishment, people who have always did the same thing, people who are doing what they're doing for power. And it's frustrating us when the Republican Party, and they did this ever since I ran against David Rice and won a 60-40, won with a 60% of the vote in 2018. Well, they would come to me and they said, gosh, Bailey, you got to quit being so divisive. You need to unify. What they're telling me, what they're telling you is that they want me to lean a little bit to the left into their ways, come to the center of things. The Republican Party has a platform, and it's amazing. President Reagan was one of the first people to really, truly stand on it. And we have the answers if our electorate will stick to the core values of less government, less taxes, better education, just the whole gambit. We've got it. But when we start telling people, these establishment-minded folks, and I love your Facebook page because you're state rep, you're nailing it. And I got several to the south of me doing the same thing. No, you need to stay to this right of this message, but you're not doing it because they like this money coming from the teachers' unions and everything else. And that's the temptation with government. Once you get elected to these positions, many people want to stay because it's safe. You got amazing perks. And in order to stay, well, you got to start making more friends. So that's what's hurting us. And these people's minds get clouded, and they think unity means that, well, Republicans need to come over here where I'm at because, gosh, it's safer and it feels good. No, if we would elect leaders to stand where people say, well, Tom, if you would have won Attorney General, and Darren, if you would have won Governor, you couldn't have done any good anyway because you're in the super minority. No, there are things that we could have shown Illinois. And we could have made an impact. So yeah, I can't wait to see how this conversation goes. And I think most people know this, but we can't just sit here and let you and I be the sounding boards of this. Everybody's got work to do in their community. Start showing up at your Republican meetings. Start run for precinct committee person. If you've got an idle county, flip the leadership because it is taking place. And there's some wonderful groups that's doing some wonderful things out there. So.
Agreed.
So, yeah.
Thank you, Darren. So getting to using this chart, guys, if I'm just looking at 2022, and we ask ourselves, again, I'm talking about midterm elections for Illinoisans right now. I'm not talking about federal politics, presidential race, etc. I mean, I ask people to at least consider and accept that until we as Illinoisans start winning elections as Illinois Republicans, we don't have a huge voice on the national stage. We just don't, right? We don't have a ton of elected, we don't have any senators. What we have 3 out of 17 House seats. And we just don't have a big voice. And so we have to start winning elections in Illinois. And so we need about 500 to 550,000 votes, Republican votes, on top of what we traditionally get during these midterms. They need to be, new votes on top of those that we traditionally get. Because as you can see here, we get Republican average in a governor's race is about 1.72 million votes, going all the way back to 1978. And it doesn't deviate that much. We got to add to that. And how the Democrats have added to that significantly in the last couple of years is they target with data, because there is data out there on people that you would not believe. They target homes and people that are inclined to lean left. They're not signing up permanent vote by mail, the Democrats, to the Darren Baileys and the Tom DeVores and the X of the world, because they know we're going to vote Republican and they don't want us to vote. They want us to stay at home. And so that's why 78% of the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of vote by mail ballots are Democrat, because the Democrats are signing up and targeting those voters. And that's what Republicans have to do. I hear so many people say, oh, vote by mail, it's full of this and it's full of that. Okay, guess what? If we don't do it, we will never win another statewide election in Illinois ever. And if you're okay with that, then keep pounding your fist that we can't do vote by mail. We have to do it. We have to do it better than the Democrats. We have to target people that think like us, and we can do it. We just have to put that plan together. So that's getting me to this unity thing that I wanted to talk to you guys about tonight, okay? Because it takes unity of, there's only 3 groups I would see, and if Darren sees it differently, I'll ask him to comment. We have this establishment class of Republicans. We have Republicans that have been in politics for, decades. And I'm not going to say they're bad. I'm not going to say they're good. I'm just going to say that's a category of individuals. Then you have the donor class. You have the donor class of people that have resources. They use those resources the way that they think is best. That's fine. And then you have the grassroots people. You have the everyday people from across this state that just working to make a living, raise their families, etc. And they're not deeply engaged like the donor class even or the establishment, okay? But it takes all three of those groups in order to win general elections, right? It's going to take all three of them. And I can tell you what, President Trump figured that out a long time ago, right? He knows it takes all three of those groups. And so that's what we as Republicans need to do. We need to bring all three of those groups together if we want to win a general election. And in order to do that, there has to be something positive for all of those groups, okay? And the Grassroots organization, which is where I think I stand, I think that's kind of where Darren stands, it's like, okay, you want our help to win general elections, and I'm talking to the political class right now, we need something. And, you know, because you'll get the, you know, I'm not going to pick on Don Tracy, you guys. I've just used Don as an example because we have a new chairman now, or chairwoman, as you know, is Kathy Salvi. Kathy's not been in long enough for us to really see yet. But with Don, you know, he didn't want to let the grassroots have a part in the process as it related to the primaries. Because keep in mind, you have to be able to have a primary, to have a candidate selected out of the primary by Republicans, and then that person goes to the general election against the Democrats. Well, I would suggest to you humbly that the establishment class and the donor class, they want to be able to dictate who makes it through the primary and into the general election. They don't want the electorate, you, to be making those decisions. They want to find ways to put their thumb on the scale and be able to dictate who makes it to the show, for a lack of better words, okay? And so my point and my message is to you as the grassroots and to the establishment political class of the state is, you really want unity in its truest sense, then there's some things we need to accomplish in order to create that unity and not just give it lip service, okay? Because me, as someone who identifies with the grassroots, I'm not going to go out here and try to work hard and to help put us in a better position to win in general elections just so the establishment class can pick and choose who makes it to the general election. That's not unity, right? I mean, it's just not. And so that's what I want to talk about, Darren. And again, maybe now's a good time for you to explain when you decided to run in 2018, your experience, and then I'll add on to that.
Well, and that's perfect segue, because most of the people right now that we call establishment or rhinos, they started off like we did, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, with the same, principles. And what happens is they'll run, but then we, the people, we pat them on the back and say, go get them. And then we turn around and we go back to work, and we kind of lose track of, and I did that. My state representative that I ran in 2002, Cindy and I helped him win against a Democrat state representative, and everything was good. He believed what I believed, and 14 years later, he's voting for a 32% tax increase. I had no intention on running for government. I just started sharing the information because I was angry. So the next thing you know, people come and they say, well, why don't you run? So that's my question now to everybody. Get involved and get to know your state representative. Get to know them, whether they're a Democrat or whether you agree with them or like them, your state rep, your state senator. Get to know those people and go to their offices. Pay attention to their votes when they're in session, and be very nice and call them out. When you disagree with them, let them know. When you and by doing that, you're going to gain a better understanding, number one, of what they truly stand for. And number two, I believe we're going to begin to hold more people like that accountable. But it takes some guts to stand up against Bruce Rauner was governor when I did this, and he was there were some political games being played. And I believe, in a way, Bruce Rauner told my state representative to support this 32% tax increase because there's trade-offs that take place. And when he did that, and when the people of our district found out, they were angry. But guess what? Bruce Rauner rewarded the state representative that I ran against by giving him $1.5 million. In that.
So I want to set this up, Darren, for you. So when you decided to run in your state rep district against the incumbent Republican. Now, keep in mind, the district that you're in is an extremely red district, correct?
Yes.
So a Republican is going to carry that seat once the
Yes.
primary is over. You're not
Right.
going to have any real threat of a Democrat, correct?
Right. Right.
And so when you decided, hey, I'm going to run in the primary against this person because I don't believe that he is engaging in representation that's on the best interest of our district, this is what your experience was that you're now talking about. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Well, that's exactly right. So then we, won the primary. And then I get calls. I'm everybody's friend all of a sudden. All the leadership, Durkin gives me a call. Jim Durkin.
How much got spent against you, Darren, by the establishment class in that primary?
$1.6 million. And
so
I was able to.
$1.6 million of money was spent by Republicans against you as a Republican to try to keep that gentleman in office because he was voting for things that they needed him to vote for. Is that correct?
Yes. The House Republicans did what they always do. They came in with the mail rebates, and the state party did the same thing they always do. They came in with $50,000 here and there, but most of it was Rounder's money, and which was given through the state organization. So upon winning well, then they all come to me, and then they all want pat you on the back, and they elevate you and give you some little perks. And I'll never forget that first call from Durkin. Hey, you will vote for me for obviously you'll vote for me against Madigan. I said, no, sir. I said, I'm going to wait and see it. You're a bad leader. So I said, if I can find someone else who will run, that's who I'm going to support. So you really do. You got to be kind of bold and forthright and courageous through this. So I served the 2 terms. You and I sued Pritzker, and people were, it was, so therein lies the question: do you just stay put over here, state rep, or do you gain more influence? Because that's we need a bigger footprint so we can continue to educate people. So I decided to run for a Senate. When my senator stepped down, who also supported the 32% tax increase, the doggone establishment went out and found someone to primary me again, and it wasn't that big a deal. I won that primary with 92% of the vote, but there was about $250,000 funneled just from establishment-minded people. So hey, here's a way to get rid of Darren. And of course, we all know
the Senate caucus went and found a moderate Republican.
Well, the state party, the Senate caucus didn't necessarily, but the state party was involved in it.
The Illinois GOP. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So no, I mean, what you're saying is dead on. There is just so much wasted. I've started kind of pushing, we look at the race that you and I were involved in, and especially with that slate that was put up when $100 million was wasted. That's when the grassroots in Illinois came to life. And gosh, what if that money could be let the local state reps, state senators, congressional races, let them fight it out. And let's start fighting Democrats like you're suggesting. And what if that money was saved? What if that money was put towards, the general election? Every 102 counties in Illinois, what would it cost to hire a team, a leader at least in each county? I mean, between you and I, I've had over 10,000 grassroots boots on the ground, people actually working, in the governor's race. And if we employed some of those people, and others just want to help out, and we put them to work in each county, making sure that Republicans were registered to vote, and Republicans were encouraged to vote, and that the mail-in ballots, like what I witnessed. I kid you not.
Tell them that story.
Whenever early voting started in the suburbs, we're walking around up there, and all of a sudden the population. I was going once or twice a week. I'd go walk with my volunteers and just wow, thank you. But as soon as early voting started, we're walking around handing our cards out. The traffic increased threefold, and about 2 weeks into it, I saw a staffer, a Democrat staffer that I recognized from Springfield. I jumped across the street and I said, "What are you guys doing?" And all of them have backpacks, briefcases, or they're pulling luggage. And she opens it up, and they've all got these iPads and laptop computers, and they're finding these low propensity voters, somebody that might have voted Democrat 20, 30 years ago. Maybe they haven't voted since then, but they knew there was 5 or 6 people in the house. So they was showing up at the door. They were getting them to vote. They were registering everyone in the house. And hey, you want me to bring you a ballot next week? Yep, sure. They did that. They'd come back a third time. Hey, I'm here to get your ballot. You need help filling it out. It's legal. So let's
Permanent vote
do
by
it.
mail while we're at it.
Yeah, yeah. And then day of voting, get some of that money, some of that $100 million, and it could have been spent for going around and picking people up and actually taking them to vote, in the county. So we got a lot of work to do. But again, unity. We're talking about, and you nailed it. No, what you said, the establishment, the donor class, and the grassroots, and we've got to
Yes,
overcome this.
and we as Republicans, you would agree with me, Darren, that if we bring all of these groups together and put together a strategic long-term plan, I mean, we're not getting anything done by 2024 in Illinois. You and I know that.
Right.
But all of those groups rowing in the same direction would go a long way in accomplishing some of what we're talking about.
We could change. Yes.
You, like me, we have relationships with these grassroots individuals. We know what their reservations are and why they're reluctant to help the political class. And when I say political class, I'm talking about the establishment. And I'm not saying these are bad people, just so we're clear. That's not that simple.
Agree.
The establishment and the donor class, that's kind of the political class. Why the grassroots are reluctant to work with them. And so if the Kathy Salvi, who, again, I like Kathy personally. I don't have any issues with Kathy. But if she really wants to try to make Republicans successful, and she wants to get everybody on the same team and not just talk about it, but actually do it, some of the things that I believe, and you and I have discussed, and I think we're kind of aligned in that need to happen before that's ever going to take place, we need to talk about them openly so a conversation begins if they're going to take us serious. Because if these types of things aren't going to be taken seriously, then sadly we're never going to get anywhere. And so I wanted to talk about them with you. And again, you and I experienced this, so that's why I thought we were both well suited to talk about it. But there's really 4 things that I thought, and it's not exhaustive, there could be others, but 4 things that we needed to talk about, okay? And the first one I had is I said that the Illinois GOP, which is the state party, should not allow its resources to be used in a Republican primary contest, right? The party should remain neutral, and each Republican candidate in a particular race should be on equal footing as far as the party is concerned to present themselves to the electorate. And so, to me, a resolution should be passed by the state party that says we'll never use our resources in a primary. We're going to remain neutral in a primary, and we're going to let the electorate, the people, decide who's best suited to represent Republicans in the general election. One example that I'll give is this last election cycle in, I think it's the 116th district in Illinois, the House seat is held by David Severin. David had it, and he is in an ultra-red district. A Republican is not going to lose that seat to a Democrat anytime in your life, probably, Darren. And
Right.
so really what it comes down to is who's the Republican that's going to win the primary and represent the people of the 116th. David Severin had a grassroots opponent, Angela Evans, and the Illinois GOP, the state party, spent, combined with the caucus, I'll get to them in a second, thousands and tens of thousands of dollars fighting against Angela Evans, the Republican grassroots candidate, against David Severin, who I would consider the establishment incumbent. To me, that's wrong. If you want unity, if unity is the goal, you got to stop that. And I had a Republican establishment person, I won't say their name, said to me once, but Tom, if we've got a good elected official, why wouldn't we do that? And I started laughing, Darren, and I said, who defines good? Does the chairman of the Illinois GOP define good? Does the donor class define good? Does the establishment define good? I said, you know who I want to define good?
Yep.
Define good by picking the right candidate. Yeah. So go ahead, Darren, as to the Illinois GOP and them using their resources, what's your take on that?
Tom, you're dead on. Again, we've got to win as Democrats, and we see that the money is tough coming into Republicans. The same race in the primary. I was running for congressional race, and the national GOP threw in over $4 million against me. And Kevin McCarthy, the establishment, they were able to convince President Trump to endorse my opponent I believe a deal was cut for whatever. President Trump, smart, he's got to win. So I understand.
Yep.
But the grassroots did, our movement, the final vote tally was less than 1,000 votes. So the grassroots movement is alive and well, because for an endorsement from President Trump and only to lose by less than 1,000 votes is pretty impressive. But you're exactly right. When all that junk is coming out, it really does. It clouds that race you're talking about. People get confused and people get frustrated and they just walk away. They're like, I don't know what to believe. Because what I find when the GOP, state or national, gets involved, well, there's a reason why they're wanting involved, because they've got somebody. And especially when you have my very first state rep race, my state representative turned in, he was a yes man. He would do whatever the party and establishment told him to. If they told him to go vote for a Democrat bill, that's sometimes what they do. Our gas tax, half of the Republicans in the House voted for it because there were backroom deals cut. And that's right. What happens when leadership, when the party, when the powers that be can find that person, that's who they support. And when they see the Tom DeVores and the Darren Baileys of the world, who aren't going to cower and aren't going to back down, they're going to do whatever they think they need to do to make sure that we don't see the light of day. The grassroots change that.
You're exactly right. And we'll get to that in a second, Darren. But when you take someone, again, I can only speak for myself and I won't speak for you, I would never do that. But if I'm an elected official, I'm going to vote the way the people that I represent want me to vote. I don't give a damn who likes it. Right? Yep. And it doesn't matter if the people of my district, if not Charlie Meyer was gone and I was there, and I'm not saying that I'm doing that, I'm just hypothetical. I don't give a crap what the teachers union says. I don't give a crap what Tony McCombie says. I care what the people of my district say. And I guarantee you the people of my district didn't tell Charlie Meyer to vote for the biggest tax increase in Illinois history, but he voted for it. We'll get to that later. But you're right. And again, I'm not disrespecting Mr. Severin at all. I've only met him once. I'm sure he's a fine guy. But to my point, which again, you and I are talking about unity, if unity is the goal, then from the grassroots perspective, the Illinois GOP stays out of primaries and doesn't spend a dime on them, doesn't endorse anybody, and they tell the Dave Severins of the world, again, I'm just using Dave as an example, if you can't win that primary race on your own, then you've got a problem with the electorate of the 116th, and that's not for us to solve.
That's
right. So they spend, again, combined, Dave had over $110,000 or $15,000 spent on his behalf by the establishment, whether it was the caucus or whether it was the Illinois GOP, against a well-meaning lady that just wanted to try to run and put her name out there. And she got out, I don't remember what she spent. She might have loaned $20,000 to her campaign or something. Right. But, that was just absurd. And so that's number one that I wanted to leave people with that are watching, is that we need a resolution out of the Illinois GOP that says we will not spend our resources on primaries ever, under any circumstance. Can we agree on that, Darren?
100%.
Okay, let's go to number two. Now, for many of you, you might not know that not only do we have the Illinois State Party, we have a House and a Senate caucus. Okay, Darren I don't know that you ever belonged. Did you ever belong to either one of them, Darren?
No, I would not pay my dues for that, for the very reason. Because I told them, I said, you guys owe me money. I said, I had to fight and spend against $1.6 million. And I literally I was keeping a tally, and I had it down to where they owed me like $700,000 and some thousand before I would pay any dues.
That's what we're going to talk about right now.
Then I'll join your cause.
Right. Because so folks, just you need to understand that there's a House caucus and a Senate caucus, and members of, let's use the House of Representatives for an example. I like them better or I like the Senate caucus better than the House caucus. I think if you're involved in politics in Illinois at any level, you have an understanding that it's generally understood that our Senate caucus is a little more functional and healthy than our House caucus. Would you agree with that, Darren?
Wild West in the House,
yes. So the House caucus is a complete and utter disaster. We have 40 members in our Illinois House of Representatives, Republicans, and I believe 32 of them belong to the caucus. I think the 8 of them, probably the Freedom Caucus for the most part. Chris Miller, Blaine Wilhauer, Adam Eberg. Did I say Blaine? I mean, they don't pay, right? And
Right,
so,
yeah.
but these individuals pay dues into the caucus, okay? And so then you ask yourself, well, what does the caucus do with the dues? And we would, as Republicans, like to say, well, they use that money to beat Democrats. Don't laugh, Darren. You know where it is.
IPP, Incumbency Protection Program.
Incumbency Protection Program. So let me give you, Darren has the example, and we're going to use his in a second. But before I tell you what the caucus, the House caucus does, I'm going to read to you what I believe a resolution should be by the Illinois GOP. Now, the Illinois GOP doesn't control the caucuses, right? This is purely political, right? And so I believe that the Illinois GOP should pass another resolution that says it does not condone or support the House or Senate caucuses using its resources to meddle in Republican primaries. They're going to lose their mind on that, aren't they, Darren?
And they are.
Because let me tell you how it works. They pay their dues into the caucus, 10 or 15,000 bucks a year. Each of these 32 approximately House members pay that into the caucus. The caucus uses that money almost primarily to defend its members against grassroots candidates that might run against them in a primary. I'm going to give you an example. Remember when I just said Mr. Severin down here in the 116th? He pays his dues into the caucus. And so when he drew a primary opponent, Miss Evans, this last cycle, the caucus took tens of thousands, again, in aggregate with the Illinois GOP, over 100 grand, and they fought off the grassroots candidate and protected him. So the Incumbent Protection Program, I'm going to use that, Darren. I love it. That's what they're using this money for. So if we're talking about unity, if we want to be unified, we do not as a party condone fighting our own people when they want to run for office. If Angela Evans or somebody else wants to run in a primary against an incumbent Republican, let them run. Don't spend money on those races, because if Mr. Severin, as I said, couldn't win on his own volition without having to pound this poor woman into political oblivion with all their money, then maybe he didn't deserve to be there. Now, let me give you another example to the contrary. Blaine Wilhauer, Representative Wilhauer, drew a primary opponent this last election cycle, and the HRO didn't defend him because he doesn't pay his dues, because Blaine doesn't believe in that, using money like that to fight fellow Republicans. Blaine would tell you that if I can't defend my own self and my own record in my district without having to have an unfair advantage of all of that money that they're using, then I probably shouldn't be an elected official, and I respect that. So that's why my second resolution is that the Illinois GOP passes a resolution that says we don't condone or support the caucuses for spending money to protect incumbents against grassroots candidates. Now, Darren, tell them in 2018 when you decided to run against this, was it Mr. Rice?
Yeah.
They spent the caucus and these other groups spent over $1 million defending him
over
against
$1.5 million,
right?
and I'm arguing this, and I'm arguing the same thing. And groups like the Farm Bureau and the Teachers Union. I'm going to tell you what. You see teachers unions supporting, you see a candidate taking so much as $1 or anything, or an endorsement card coming out from the teachers union, that is an automatic. I mean, that is like shaking hands with the devil, period.
We're coming to that. Give it to me.
Okay, all right. But no,
yeah,
I argued that too. I said, what in the world is the matter? We've got to win, push that money up into the Chicago area and over to the Metro East where we could win races if we were smart with our money. But they like having these people who they can control and tell what to do. That's kind of, but yeah, Tom, you're dead on. So
yeah, we're using the resources in these caucuses that should be used to win races against Democrats. We're using it to protect this ever-shrinking group of Republican elected officials that continues to get smaller and smaller because we're not trying to grow the party. They're spending their money trying to protect the ones that are left.
Right. And so it's the leadership, see, that's doing that, because when I first ran, when I was the first state rep in 2018, I guess 2019, the pay was $67,000. Well, today it's 94, and guess what? Automatic increase now with inflation. It goes up at least 3% every year. But what a lot of people don't realize is in the House and in the Senate, if you have a chairmanship in a committee, that's another, well, it was 5,000. It's probably more than that now. These leadership positions on the floor, they say, well, I'm a minority leader, or maybe I'm the minority chair, and you're talking anywhere from 5 to 20 to 40 on up $1,000 additional. So see, these people, it all boils down to money, power, prestige for these few that are in leadership. Many times it's the same way at our local counties. That's why we need to have elected precinct committee people, because if you've got some kind of little fiefdom going on, you can overthrow that easily. And the grassroots people in the right places doing the right things can bring salvation to our government and state of Illinois.
Agreed. So again, unity being the theme, which I'm all for unity when, again, it's real and it's not just compliance. I've got a proposed third resolution, Darren, that I think we should talk to people about. And it's that once the electorate, right, the people in the state, the Republican electorate, once they choose who their candidate is, right, not the thumb on the scale that we've been talking about, that the Illinois GOP will undertake to support that candidate to the fullest extent possible. It will promote and support the candidate that the electorate chooses and not sit on the sidelines because it wasn't their chosen candidate. And I'm going to use you and I as an example, not because I'm pissed. I don't care. I want it to be for our next candidate, because I knew, at least for myself, that given the structural advantages that Democrats have had since probably 2 years before Pritzker, I knew that our battle was almost impossible. But that's when we get to the general elections. Right now, you and I are talking about primaries.
Right.
But when you and I won the primaries, right? Keep in mind, I won my primary with $30,000, and I think Mr. Kim spent like $1 million and a half. But once you and I won those elections, primary elections, we got zero support from the Illinois GOP.
We got pushback. They continued to fight us. They wouldn't accept it.
They did not put, and again, you probably can better speak to this than I, because I wrote them off completely. Maybe you did too. We haven't talked about that much. They did not so much from June 29th till November, whatever is the 8th, the election day. They did not put so much as one social media post on the Illinois GOP website about my race or your race, in my opinion.
Right. You're exactly right.
So here you've got the GOP who, since they were mad because their slate of candidates, Mr. Irvin, Mr. Kim, et cetera, didn't win, they just walked away and said, we're not going to do anything, because they're sitting there going, well, these weren't our candidates and these guys can't win. Guess what? Mr. Irvin and Mr. Kim had just as little a chance of winning those elections as you and I did, because it's a structural issue with the party in general. Right. And their candidates, they weren't going to win either. It's not like all of a sudden, if Richard Irvin or Steve Kim are the candidates in the general, that another 500,000 to 600,000 votes are going to make their way into the Republican. It doesn't work that way, Darren. You know that.
Yep.
But I want a resolution that says that these people are going to support and promote a candidate no matter who the electorate chooses, right? Because they did the same crap in 2020 in Illinois with President Trump for the most part. Right. So go ahead. You know this.
This is awesome. This is good stuff. And regardless, we need to fight for these resolutions, and our precinct committee people out there that are listening. And if you're not a precinct committee person, find out, get a hold of Tom or I, and we'll let you know when your county GOP meets, and you need to show up. They can appoint you to a position. You won't have all the voting powers, but you can be there, and you can be that relentless voice of reason, and even so joining with the other people that are on our side. So no, I did the same thing with Kathy. I went to Tom upon winning the primary, or I went to Don, sorry. And I did the same thing with Kathy. And Tom, you said something that's very important. There's a few rascals, but for the most part, most of these people are good people. They're well intentioned. I'm not going to berate, for the most part, any person, but this ideal of that I deserve, to have this position. That's usually what's getting us in trouble, and this power when it goes to their head. And sometimes people are just terrible leaders. So I've went to every one of them. I went to a Kathy, and I've had that conversation. I said, like I said at the beginning of this show here, I just said, we've got influence, and we want to help wield that influence to help you, to help the party, to help the state. But you've got to work with us. You can't just expect me. I'm never going to turn over a mailing list. I'm never going to turn. I will work with you. But
your mailing list dwarfs theirs.
I know it does. And I said, let us help you. But they don't know how to do that because they're afraid of us because of these accountability measures that we bring.
You're right. And they're not so much, I don't know that they're afraid of us, Darren, but they're afraid of what we represent, which is we want the electorate to be in charge.
Right.
I want the people, the Republican people of this state, to make decisions about what we should do and how we should do it. They don't want that. Right? There's a, and I'm not going to say his name, you'll know who I'm talking about, where I asked the question a year ago, and I said, here's the question. Who is better equipped to decide who the candidate should be for the Republican Party to represent us in any election? Is it the electorate, the everyday people, or is it the political class? You understand the question?
Oh, yeah.
The answer I got was, it's easy. The political class is much better suited to make that decision. Yeah. And I just laughed and I said, we are never going to get along, and I will fight you every step of the way. Because that's what I told him, and I was quoting Jefferson, one of my favorite politicians ever. And I said, if you truly believe that you have knowledge or information that makes you better suited to know who the right candidate is, your job is to educate the electorate and explain to them why you think they need to make a different choice. The answer is not for you to take their power away from them. And they just looked at me with deer in the headlights like I was saying something that didn't make any sense. And I was like,
that's what I told Kathy. I said, we have the key, this grassroots. You're looking at these people that can donate, 50,000, 100,000, $1 million, and God bless them. We've got to have them.
We need them.
The true power. The grassroots who's sending in 5, 10, 20, they're also the ones that's out. You need these feet, you need these hands out doing the work. That's where the power is at. And they just, they so far, they've refused to understand that. Now, Kathy knows because she was running right there with us. She should know.
Kathy,
I'm going
Kathy
to
knows.
To help
I'm hopeful
her.
that Kathy will do some of the right things, but it's not so much as Kathy, is that who's behind her in her ear all the time, right?
Yes.
You and I know that.
You're right.
So let's talk about the fourth one, Darren, because the fourth one of my request of resolutions is the one that's going to draw the most ire amongst the political class. And I'm going to read it, and then we'll go from there. And this is, again, these are general language, can always be tweaked, but you'll know what it means. The Illinois GOP is going to pass a resolution that says we do not condone the taking of any financial donations from any Republican candidate, any Republican elected official, any caucus, from individuals or organizations who actively engage in political activities which are contradictory to the Republican platform. So, in English, we don't want anybody in our party taking money from the Democrats.
Yeah.
Right?
That's right.
Is that such a novel idea? And I'll start. This is a big conversation for us to have here, Darren. But I always tell people, do you think the Democrats would give Republicans money if the Democrats believed that the Republicans were using that money in such a way that we could start taking back control of our government? Hell no, they're not. Right. They will quit giving that money to us as soon as they see it as a risk. And so if Democrats are giving us money, or elected officials money, it's indicative of the fact that the Democrats like what they're doing with it, and it benefits the Democrats.
Right.
That's not complicated logic, is it, Darren?
Nope. That's exactly right.
A couple of these pieces of paper that I have here talking about this Democrat money. Here's our House Republican leadership team. This is at the end of the year, and this is for the state reps, okay? This is Republican leadership team money taking from the Democrats. And look at that, our minority leader and deputy leader right at the top, and an overwhelming majority of our House leadership takes money, hundreds of thousands of dollars, from an organization which is, can we agree that they're fundamentally opposed to the Republican platform, Darren?
Yes, 100%.
Look at that, folks. Look how much money our Republican leadership is taking. Look, our minority leader, Miss McCombie, $160,000 from the Democrats. Charlie Meyer, we'll get to Charlie. Charlie's my elected representative. He's taken almost $250,000 from the Democrats, his biggest financial donor ever. These are all the leadership. So do you think there's a relation between Republicans being ineffective as Republicans in Illinois and the fact that the majority of your leadership takes money from the Democrats? Do you think there's a connection there, you guys? Show them the next one.
Tom, while you're pulling this other one up, I've always told people, go to illinoissunshine.org. You can type in anybody's name. You can look up the donors. Because here's the other thing. When you and I were fighting so hard in 22, and when we were, needing those few extra dollars, and God bless, I think everyone that's probably listening here, they were sending in $5 and $10 and $20. But when these people's, most of these players here on this list here, they had $250,000. Some of them, a couple of them had over $500,000 towards $1 million. You think they used any of that to help you or I? That's exactly
Zero.
Right.
This list here, folks, shows every one of the 19 senators, Republican senators. This is all 19 of them, okay? Look at the caucus chair, Neil Anderson. I personally get along with Neil fine. Again, none of this is me being negative about a human being. Just disagree with him. Neil, $240,000. Sue Resin, the deputy leader, $130,000. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of your 9, 2/3 of your Senate leadership takes money from an organization that's fundamentally opposed to the Republican platform. $750,000. So that you add these two up, it's $1.7 million or so they're giving to the Republicans. Now, I'll ask you again, do you believe that they give this money to the Republicans because the Republicans are using the money in a way to defeat Democrats? Of course they're not. They're giving them the money because they're using that money to perpetuate their own existence, okay? Go back to the other one, Ryan, with Charlie Meyer. Okay, let's talk about this one here. I'm going to use Charlie as an example for you guys. Remember when Darren and I explained to you that the caucuses, it's the incumbent protection program? Charlie is the best example of what Darren and I are talking about here. If you look here at this spreadsheet, that is all of the money that Charlie Meyer has collected from the Democrats since he's been a House representative. $240,000 of Democrat funding that Charlie's taken in. See where I've got it highlighted in red right there in March of 2018, an extra $40,000. They typically send him in $10,000, $15,000 a year. But on this one occasion in 18, he got $40,000. Well, guess what happened in 18? He voted for the largest tax increase in Illinois history, same time when Darren's former rep that Darren beat voted for it. And guess what? Charlie drew a primary opponent in that year. And so the Democrats not only sent him his $10,000, his standard annual stipend of $10,000, they sent him an extra $40,000 to fight off that primary opponent, okay? And so when Charlie collects all this money from the Democrats, he sends a huge chunk of that money to the House caucus. It's his insurance policy where if Charlie draws a primary opponent, they come back firing against that primary opponent, that grassroots opponent, and they'll outspend you $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 to $5,000, and you don't have a chance to get your message out there because an everyday person can't accomplish that. Now, Darren was fortunate to be in a position where he was able to fight off a $1.6 million fight from the incumbent that was financed by the establishment. Charlie fared better. and he voted for the tax increase, and he was able to fight off the primary opponent with the money from the Democrats, guys. So my fourth one is really, to me, I'm most passionate about this, is that we as the state party pass a resolution. And again, it's not binding. You can't throw anybody in jail. It's not like it's authoritative, but it's a principled position that a party takes. We do not condone the taking of money from these people, right? Because it's keeping us in the super minority.
Right.
And I'm let Darren take over when I tell you this. If that money that they give these Republican candidates, you saw it, if that money was being used in such a way that we were getting more Republicans elected, they'd quit giving the money. So just tell them, take your money and shove it where the sun doesn't shine. We're going to come fight, and we're going to start taking seats back away from you. So the money that they're getting is indicative of what it's being used for. So if you get some establishment person saying, oh, I take their money because I got to get money from somewhere, and I don't do what they want. Yes, you do. What you're doing is not helping more Republicans get elected, because my friend Charlie Meyer, I'm being facetious, he's not my friend. If he used that money, that $240,000, to help other Republicans across the state get elected, they'd quit giving him the money. So he uses it to protect himself. And then when they need him, he votes for a tax increase. He voted for the gas tax increase, Charlie did. The Invest in Kids tax credit that was so dear to a lot of people, he didn't support that because the teachers union didn't want him to. Charlie is a pawn for the teachers union, and that money and the way he votes is evidence of that. And so that's why our party needs to step up and say, we're not going to condone this anymore. Go ahead, Darren.
I'm going to be behind you 100% on all this because I love it. So, and you're right, it's not working. So when I showed up to work my first day in January of 2019, first time ever Republicans were in the super minority. And guess how many we had in 2019? We had 44. Now we have 40. We continue to lose influence. We have the answers if we'll show up and stand on our morals and on the platform. So you're nailing it. And everyone listening here can take this message to their party, to their county group, to your grassroots. Man, there's about 8, 9, or 10 really hardcore grassroots. We go back to 2008 and 2010 when the Tea Party groups really got fired up, and some of the remnants of those groups are still out there. And if you go out there and you start engaging with your state rep and your senator, and if they are these rhinos and establishment-minded people, you frustrate them to death, frustrate them to where they don't want to serve, and find new people who will step up. And that's what we need. We just need a cleansing. And because these people that we're talking about, Tom, they're not just going, oh gosh, they're voting right now as we speak. This session this spring, they'll cast the votes, but that day comes whenever leadership comes to them. These Democrats are smart. These Chicago Democrats, they'll come and they'll tell them, the bill's going to pass. So you give us so many votes and you'll get something out of it. That's how all this works in these backroom deals.
It's what they do here, and you're right. The Democrats will come to these ever shrinking group of Republicans and say, we're going to pass this bill whether you like it or not. And you do this for us so we can make it sound like it's bipartisan.
Yep.
And if you draw a primary opponent because of the result, we'll bring in Democratic money in there and we'll pound that grassroots primary opponent back away, and you'll be safe. You know, because they know, the Democrats know they can't win these Republican red districts you and I are talking about. They know a Democrat can't sit there, so they'll get a Republican that they like and tell them, when we really need you, vote the way we need you to, like Charlie did with the gas tax, like Charlie did with the income tax increase. He wouldn't support the Invest in Kids.
Just don't show up if nothing else. That's exactly right.
Don't show up. And when he drew the ire of the people of the district, they protected him. And if we don't stop doing that stuff, we're never going to have unity.
Right.
We're never going to win general elections. We can win general elections against Democrats if everybody, the establishment, the donors, and the grassroots all work together. I believe that the math is there. We can pick up the votes that we need, but we're never going to have unity when the grassroots people look at what the establishment and the donor class is doing and trying to keep them out of the process. They're trying to keep them out of the process. They want their votes in the general election, but they want to decide who makes it to the general election.
Right.
And the grassroots are not standing for that anymore. They're just not. And so if Kathy, God love her, if she wants there to really be a shot, she's got to do some of these things, Darren. And if they're not going to do these things, then they're just not going to get anywhere. And we'll just continue to keep losing. And the ever shrinking group of senators and House members for Republicans is going to continue to get smaller, and it's never going to grow. It's just not.
That's right. Nope. We hold it within our grasp to change it, and we gotta say what needs to be said and do what needs to be done. And I see that happening. It's slow, and I do see that happening. We just got to keep it up. And I thank you so much.
It is slow. It is slow,
Yeah.
you know, and people are frustrated. I get that. I spend a lot of time, you know, trying to keep focus, because people get frustrated with a lot of different things. You know, they get into policy. They don't like this policy or that. And I try to bring them back and say, you know what? We as Republicans in Illinois, we don't have the benefit of being able to influence policy. We can't influence policy, right?
Right.
And so what we need to spend all of our energy on as Republicans is how do we win seats in the House? How do we win seats in the Senate? How do we position ourselves for down the road to be effective competitors in statewide elections? That's what we need to focus on. And again, we got to put our energy there. And it's really hard to get our existing group of again, 40 House members, 19 senators.
Yep.
They need to be focusing on how do we grow and get more seats in their respective sides of the legislature. I'm not talking about what bill somebody's proposing or might be fighting against. It's like, come on, you guys. I mean, that's just giving lip service to the grassroots base.
Right.
Be honest with them and tell them you can't influence a damn thing right now,
Right.
but we're going to try to win elections. And that's my biggest problem with Kelly.
No, that's right. And one more argument that you'll hear a lot. You'll hear people talk about the money that I brought back to my district. That's your tax dollars. And you know, people even right here in Clay County, people are, you know, they're starting to get their tax bills, their property tax bills, and they're asking, why in the world? Why are my property taxes continuing to go up? And everybody likes to see that nice, new, shiny object in their community, whether it's a school addition, whether it's a community hall or whatever. But your schools and your, you know, here in Illinois, and this goes back to the teachers union and how they and why they support specific candidates and why several Republicans would not stand up for the Invest in Kids Act. You know, the proof is out there. WirePoints has it all, that 70+% of the kids that we're graduating every year cannot read and write at grade level. That's what we're pumping out into society. That's unacceptable. Yet we continue to build new football fields, new ball courts, new ball diamonds. And you know, that's what we have going on here locally, you know, a several $1 million project. And people are asking, my property taxes. Well, that's your property taxes. Show up at your school boards. At least show up once a quarter and at least understand what's going on, and then you can voice your opinion. But you know, the both of the state reps that you've mentioned and some other senators, when they catch that primary, well, then all of a sudden they'll back up and like, look at this project that, you know, this gas, they voted for the gas tax so we can start building more. No, I will contend that we have all the money in the tax coffers that we need, and we can cut a lot of that out and start pushing that back to the people if we prioritize our spending. You know, you and I and everyone listening, we have a budget that we live on. We can't just go out and buy whatever we want. And every year on my farm, I find that I have waste. I find that I need to do things differently, and I need to back up and do without this and reprioritize. The problem with government is they don't do that. They just continue to stack on and stack on and stack on. That's why we have a continued tax burden.
All right. I think we gave them about an hour's worth, Darren. I really appreciate you.
This is awesome. I'm behind you 100% on all this, sir. So thank you.
I appreciate it. And I'm going to keep, like I said, advocating. If the party unity, I'm all about it. And I just want people to understand unity is more than just saying we have it. Unity requires the level playing field, that everybody has an equal voice. And right now, until they make some of these proposed changes, I see that as unity is nothing more than lip service. So I'm glad you took the time to participate.
Thank you for doing this.
We'll keep talking about it more. If anybody has any questions, reach out to Darren or I. We'd be glad to talk about it.